Well, welcome back to episode 2 of our DCL 201 series, our new series that kind of showcases how we are getting and using some of our tips from our 101 series and just all the stuff that we've learned from you, the listeners, over the years as we've been doing the podcast, and how we are getting to our cruise over in Europe this summer. And I'd like to welcome back to our show as well my beautiful wife, Anawake.
Hello.
And today we are going to talk about how we are flying over to Europe, how we're going to get there. And our show's been on a little bit of a hiatus because I hope you enjoyed the intro. I want to give a plug out to our next door neighbor who put that together for us.
Hey, Rocky.
Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. Put a little different intro on there just to kind of showcase it's a different show. So there you go. In the future, for our 2-1 series, we hope to get Christy on and maybe showcase how she plans for maybe a cruise out of Florida. She's got one coming up later in November when she's going to be doing her double dip. So I'm going to put her to work and get her to do a 2-1 series, kind of talking about how she plans for something stateside. But today we are going to talk about how we get over to Europe and how we are going to get over to Europe for this cruise. So just to set it up, we live over on the West Coast still. We live in Portland. And what our plan is to get to Rome, where the cruise is leaving out of. We're doing the 9-day Greek cruise out of Rome, out of Civitavecchia, and we decided to go to Paris ahead of time.
Basically, when we start looking to book airfare, we know that mileage tickets become available 330 days out. If you're purchasing a ticket, usually the 4-month window is the best, but we will look at 330 days out to see what itineraries are available and what the mileage, how many miles it's going to take to get where we want to go, and then kind of decide from there if we have enough miles to go both ways on miles, if we want to purchase one way and use miles the other way, kind of just look at all of the options. The other thing that's probably a little bit unique to our family is that being airline employees, we bid for our vacation for the following year in September, and so we sometimes are making plans prior to knowing whether Steve and I both actually have vacation at that time. So oftentimes the far future planning is just for me and our children. And then we worry about Steve when we know for sure that he has vacation,
So that's a little window into our crazy life. Yeah.
So I guess I will say, if your family falls into that situation in any way where you are planning for some family members and not the others, you need to make sure that any children that are under 13, if you're doing a domestic trip, or under 18, if you're going internationally, are paired with an adult. And because even if you're all on the same flight, if you are not all on the same itinerary, your children will be considered unaccompanied minors, and that's going to could potentially cause you some issues. So our kids are 9 and 13, so we need to make sure that they are each with one of us. So in this particular case, we booked me and both boys, and actually had enough miles to take both of us, or all three of us, round trip. So,
okay, before you jump into that part and to get too far into the weeds, so our plan was to spend a couple days in Paris ahead of the trip, and then pop down to Rome, do the cruise, and then come home. So all our time over in Europe is going to be spent ahead of it versus afterwards. I wish we could spend more time over there, but there's only so much vacation to go around. And luckily, we got our vacations all lined up perfectly this year. So one of the things that we like to do from our perspective, being on the West Coast, is we do not like an East Coast stopover. And there's a lot of reasons for that we don't like it, but it's just painful generally, to be completely honest. If you come from the West Coast, for us, for our personalities, to go to the East Coast, sit for several hours, and then go to Europe. So what we look for when we can with our mileage programs is to go we love Icelandair. That's been a great alternative to go through Keflavik and
honestly,
then over.
Yeah, I will say just great shout out to them, that because of where Iceland is located on the globe and the way that they run their flights, it actually it works with your sleep schedule best to make that stop over there. It's actually shorter flights, and we seem to not be as tired when we get there than we are when we do other time periods.
Right. So we either like to do that or we like to get a nonstop all the way from the West Coast all the way to Europe. And we did that last time with British out of Seattle. And you guys are doing that again this time.
We are doing that again. We fly from Portland, just quick trip up to Seattle, then Seattle, London, and then from London on to Paris.
Yeah. So before we get into the gist of all that, mileage programs, there's a lot of different information out there. We don't have time to cover it here today. We use the Alaska credit card, which is obviously our company too. It kind of works for us. We actually do buy tickets on Alaska several times out of the year as well, so we can accumulate miles that way. Obviously, stateside, Southwest is a great alternative. JetBlue, Delta, United, they'll have different mileage programs that you can take a look at and figure out what works best for you. A couple of resources just to look at for your basic. If this is all brand new to you, you can go to a website called thepointsguy.com. And they've got some great basic information for learning about the mileage programs that you may want to get involved with. And for a more PhD kind of level, you can go over to Joe and Trevor's podcast, the Saverosity Observation Deck podcast. That's a great podcast as well. I love it when they bring people on that are really, it's way more advanced, but I love it when they bring on some of their guests that are deep in the woods with the miles and points programs, and they talk about how they got started, so you can kind of get a gist of how maybe it will fit into maybe your lifestyle. So
use it to your advantage.
Yeah. So those are just a couple of the ways that, if you can use miles, that makes these trips much more affordable, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, and that's the only reason we can do them.
Right. Yeah. For a family, it makes more sense if you can fly for free whenever you can.
Or leverage some part of the trip. Right. Yeah, whether it's, hotels, if you travel a lot and you get those hotel points, and we've got a lot of friends that do that, so they can save for their hotels for free. But however you want to do it, if you can find ways to leverage a little bit of savings in the trip, that's awesome. So why don't you talk about how you guys are going, and then I'll talk about, we ended up, well, I guess before we do that, when we looked at the best way to use the miles, we had enough miles for you and the boys to go to Europe and back, except for one point, and that was to go from Paris to Rome. And it was actually super cheap, fairly cheap to use just to buy tickets on Air France from Paris to Rome. And so that's what we did.
Inside of Europe, it does seem to be relatively affordable to find flights and good frequency between just about any major city in Europe and the other major cities. It seems to be fairly affordable, and you have your choice of flight times. Yeah. They happen pretty frequently.
And I will throw this out there. There's definitely cheaper tickets. These are pretty cheap tickets. I think we paid less than $79 each one way to go between Paris and Rome. You can definitely go cheaper with a Ryanair, Eurowings, and then there's a Spanish. I can't remember what the Spanish. Vueling, yeah, over there. But just be aware of the different
service, the different service levels. That if you are going on, Air France or Lufthansa or British or KLM or one of the major carriers in Europe, you might pay slightly more, but they've been around for a long time. You're kind of more guaranteed. If that's possible, but you're more guaranteed that everything's going to go without a hitch, and that if there is a problem, they're going to fix it for you.
That's true to an extent.
Except they do the best they can.
Yeah, the French do have their they do go on strike every now and then, so that's always a possibility. And I think Lufthansa was just on strike, so that could cause you some problems too. But I think the bigger factor is really they are kind of, when you start thinking about Ryanair and whatnot, they're kind of more on that Spirit level. So just be aware of the different costs that they're going to add on based on what you may or may not want them to do. So as far as if you've got 8 different bags that you're dragging with you, look how much it's going to cost you to pay for those bags on top of, maybe an Air France ticket. And the other thing is a lot of times those carriers fly into outer cities, so you may not be landing at the main airport. So flying into Civitavecchia or flying into Rome, not Civitavecchia, but flying into Rome, the airport is probably 45 minutes or so by train outside of the city. And it's got a really it's the Leonardo da Vinci line train that runs straight from the airport into the city. So it's well set up. Now,
I believe it actually runs from the main Rome airport into the main train station. So if you wanted to get out of the city, you could do that easily as well.
Right. We're kind of getting a little deep in the weeds, but kind of think about it as Sanford down in Orlando versus MCO. Sanford, yeah, you can fly there. You can get cheaper tickets on a company like Allegiant or whatnot. But the infrastructure to get you to Walt Disney World is not set up. Like, you don't have the Magical Express that goes directly from MCO to Walt Disney World. So those are just some things to think about if you decide to go with a carrier, one of the low-cost carriers over there. Okay, so with that said, so what we ended up doing was we bought a ticket between Paris and Rome. And then once you talk about what you guys did, because we used miles for you, and since we didn't know I had my vacation yet, and we didn't actually have enough miles for all four of us, we bought a ticket for me. So why don't you talk about what you guys are doing?
So the kids and I will, when we head to Europe, we will fly from Portland to Seattle, and then Seattle to London, London, Paris. And then on the way home, again, this certain places in Europe, and because we live in Portland, which isn't a super major city, we have struggled sometimes with getting all the way home all in one day. What we are doing on the way home is leaving Rome, flying, I think, through London again.
Through London
I can't remember right now. From Rome to London, and then London to Boston, and we get into Boston late-ish in the day, and then we're going to spend the night, and then the kids and I are leaving in the morning from Boston and coming on home.
Yeah, for some reason, Rome just does not line up with getting back to Portland.
We kind of struggled when we did the Mediterranean cruise with the kids. We struggled getting home from Barcelona, too, and so chose to spend a couple of days longer and go to Germany and then get home that way, and it was easy. So,
and the other thing being an outlier like Portland, if you're one of those outlier cities, you know, I remember talking to some friends we met on the cruise in the Mediterranean. They lived in San Diego, and their tickets were way cheaper out of San Diego and the LA area than what we were seeing up here out of Portland. We used miles, so it didn't matter, but I was shocked at how the difference in the ticket price, I guess. I shouldn't say shocked. I know better. Supply and demand. Exactly. So, and for them, living in the SoCal region, they could get back in that.
They could.
Yeah, in one day. But for us, it's a little bit tougher. So, because we didn't have enough points, and I wasn't sure at the time that we booked it. And that's the other thing too, as far as booking goes. If you see a flight that you want, you're probably best to book it sooner if you're using your miles, because they disappear quickly. You can probably find a mileage ticket to get to places last minute. Well, not last minute, but you can find them later. But you run into things, and you see these all the time where, like, maybe your ticket takes you to the East Coast, and then you've got a 24-hour layover before you continue on, where just like everything else, I guess, supply and demand and those better tickets kind of go away quickly.
Yeah, definitely. If you plan to use miles, you really truly need to be on right as soon as the tickets are available, the seats are available to be booking it, just to make sure that you get the most direct itinerary and the kind of the most bang for your buck. You save up those miles, and you don't, nobody wants to spend 24 hours in some way station in the middle of their getting home after they've been on a cruise. So.
Yeah. And that kind of goes for, I don't have a feel because we haven't used our miles so much around the States, but, looking at mileage, we've looked at miles to get over to Hawaii and stuff like that, like for our family that live back in Minnesota. And yeah, the direct one, either the direct flight or the one stops, they kind of go away quickly. I know our aunt has.
She's had some, yeah.
Yeah, they stayed over for 24 hours in Phoenix or something like that, right. And then that costs you money to stay in the hotel, or you're sleeping in an airport, which nobody really wants to do, right? No. So and then for myself, I started kind of looking at it. Last year we had some luck putting together different airlines to get home, which is what we did when we came back from Rome, but I just couldn't really find something that it was just going to be convoluted this time. We could have got it probably a little bit cheaper, but I ended up finding a one-way Delta flight that, it's not one way, it stops in Atlanta. So it goes from Rome to Atlanta to Portland. That was a pretty reasonable price. It was probably, I think, about $100 more than if I pieced together like 2 or 3 different airlines to get home on the cheaper side. Plus, it just kept on flowing all the way home in one day. Whereas I think I was looking at Aer Lingus through Ireland, and it was leaving earlier out of Civitavecchia, so we were gonna have to make sure we got off the boat quickly to get to the airport, and then it was gonna have like a longer layover. Anyway, so that's what I ended up doing, is we just bought a ticket on Delta. So
I'd also say, as far as purchasing tickets, that it's hard to know is the price going down, is the price going up. It does tend to. It seems as though that 4-month window prior to traveling is the best price point as far as booking an actual ticket. But it also seems that if you're searching and you find a ticket that is a price that you consider to be reasonable, book it, because it might get to be more, it could be less, but sometimes peace of mind of knowing that you paid what you think it should cost is good to know.
Yeah, and don't look back.
Don't look back. Don't look back. Quit checking after you book it. If you find that reasonable to you price, don't look anymore.
And I will throw this out there too. When you're looking at maybe these international cruises, getting over to Europe, our Facebook group, I joined the Facebook group for the cruise. And as it kind of got to that 330-day window, a lot of people started chirping up on the Facebook group about, hey, how's everybody getting over there? This is the price I'm looking at out of here. Oh, I found this price out of Chicago. I found this price out of Philadelphia or something like that. So another, I guess, plug for the Facebook groups, to give you another resource to listen to what other people are finding and maybe throw out there, whatever questions you might have as far as different websites people are using and whatnot else. So just a plug for the Facebook groups, I guess. So anything else you can think of as far as getting over to Europe for us on this cruise? Mm-mm. Well, that's kind of a look into how we're getting there. Our next one we will talk about is hotels.
Sounds good.
And where we're staying, which we still need to figure out where we're staying in Paris.
Figure out.
We got the one figured out in Rome. We need to get you set up in Boston. But yeah, anyways. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this show. And until next time, have a great holidays. And we'll see you next time on the 201.
Bye.